Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. I am your host, BTC. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and we're going to get into everything going on in the market from the past 24 hours in just a moment. But a reminder before we do that, nothing that we say here is financial advice, my friends. We do not know anything for sure, so please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How is that little prison that you're in Chelsea? And how did you find our little meetup yesterday?
GM doing quite well. I mean, markets look fantastic. ETH at 2.5K, BTC at 47K. It's just adding to the good mood after a very lovely meetup yesterday evening.
Indeed, damn, Bitcoin's gone past 47 now. I still haven't bought from when I got some airdrop stuff last week and this week, and I wanted to allocate a little bit, and I just thought, "Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later." And now I think 5 more K up than where I wanted to get a little bit more. So that's kind of annoying. But as you say, don't want it to get too annoying because shouldn't be annoyed ultimately when the price goes up. That's one of the things that if you want to really beat yourself around the head, that can happen. um, but we had a nice meetup yesterday, and that's another reason to not be annoyed. That was very positive. How did you find it? What did you like about it?
It was absolutely lovely. I mean, I was super happy to finally meet Confusion in person. Don't know
Ooh.
if Confusion is with us in the audience today. Also very cool that I got a chance to catch up with you, Sammy. I feel like we haven't spoken in private, at least, for quite a while. So that was fantastic. What about you? How did you enjoy it?
I liked it a lot, but one of the real, I mean, I'm gonna obviously go to the negative aspect first because that's when my brain goes. Organizing stuff is so hard. Like organizing anything is so unbelievably difficult. Like even just getting a space in a bar or a pub or whatever, so hard, which makes me just want to. It's really stressful, very
Yeah,
stressful.
Discord calls fix that.
I have no idea how Discord calls would fix it. Um, but yeah,
Because you don't have to leave your little prison. You can stay at home and talk to people.
oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. I thought you meant organize it on a Discord call. But no, I mean, I guess that's one of the issues, right? But I think ultimately the positive aspect of it is that because it's so tough to actually get people in the same place and for someone to take the lead to like just do make the effort to find a place, and particularly in London, it was interesting. I was speaking to someone yesterday and we were talking about like, look, there's a load of cool people in London, loads and loads of cool people. But it feels like quite fragmented and it's hard to get people in the same place. Like in London, if someone's in East London and Legendary now lives in Chelsea, uh, most people who live in Chelsea would be like, "Ah, East London, don't want to go there." And most people who live in North London would be like, "Oh, you're doing your event in South London. Oh, I can't be bothered. It's too far." Like, there's a lot of that in London where, like, if you're on the wrong side of town, it's just like, "Oh, can we be bothered to even make the effort?" And so, in a sense, it kind of represents the city that we're in. How difficult it is to meet up represents the city that we're in, which is quite fragmented, and each place is like very different vibe. So it's, I guess, it's kind of hard to find a middle ground where people are all kind of happy to congregate around. But I think we did that. I think we did that. It was really nice to speak to some people who I hadn't seen in a long time, some people who I had was meeting for the first time, just going off vibe and inviting them to see if they wanted to meet. And yeah, very useful. And I'm looking forward to do it again.
I mean, we'll do it again in 2 weeks in Paris, right?
Correct. Shit, it's 2 weeks away. Um, yes, we will do something again in Paris. Um, probably planning a breakfast, which we want to start to administer as well. But look, I really do think IRL. Did you not get that feeling as well? Like people crave the IRLs thing. I mean, I know you mentioned maybe partly as a joke that Discord solves all the stuff, but there's something about IRL you just can't replace, right?
I'm not so sure about that. Like I keep going back and forth on that.
Yeah, I
I
know
feel like
you.
it is the old-fashioned answer to say that, right? That IRL is so special, but we're all in the digital space and we're all trending towards metaverses and everything. I mean, yes, in a sense, it is more special. On the other hand, if all we did is kind of focus on IRL, then we wouldn't be able to connect to so many of the participants in Web3. I don't know. Me and NFT Stats would have never spoken if it were IRL only because we never met in person, right? So, I mean, there is a special element to it, but I feel like you still can form a connection online. I mean, obviously, I'm looking forward to that old-fashioned with Funky whenever we will meet the first time. But I think both has its place too.
I agree.
Strip away the joking element, but both is very, very relevant.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Both have their place, both are prominent, and they kind of achieve different things potentially. Sammy, welcome to the stage, my friend. It was good to hang out again after your long time away from London. How did you find the little meetup yesterday? How was it to be back?
Yeah, it's good. It's nice. Getting that London accent again. Sorry, I'm just in a coffee shop at the moment, so it might be a little bit loud. But yeah, it's good to catch up with you guys. I think it's been last time I saw you guys was in Miami, and I think maybe even Legendary before then. So it was really nice to catch up and meet some new faces as well. Doing some interesting things. I tend to agree with B-Check though. You do get stuff from the IRL that you don't get from online. Like, there's a lot of stuff that people talk about that you wouldn't necessarily pick up from the timeline, and kind of offers different perspectives because you suddenly realise that there's different silos within Web3 that you kind of have their own little niche that they've gone down a rabbit hole, slightly different rabbit hole to you. So it's good to kind of take a step back and get that bigger perspective.
Yeah, I like it. I like the thinking. Yeah, I think that that is true, and you definitely have people willing to reveal a bit more. I don't know. I think after being in the space for a couple of years now, I've just got slightly tired of being so unfamiliar with people. I'm kind of craving that familiarity, and I think yes, Discord calls will sort it out, and being more present with, being more familiar with people has helped. I don't know. I just think the IRL component has definitely made a difference to me. So something we'll keep thinking about how we can do that. Obviously, we have a universal audience, people in the States, in Europe, in Africa, in Singapore. I don't know, Legendary, if you know any other people in other regions, but we're going to figure out how to try to activate people over time and make sure we get to see people. Any final thoughts, Legendary, before we hit the headlines today and get into some pretty good news?
Let's get into the good news. Let's talk numbers.
Well, it's bad news, isn't it? Because the price has gone up too much and I hadn't bought in before. So even good news is bad news sometimes. Let's get into it, starting with the price action. As always, this is in the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. So let's get into it. Starting with the price action. Bitcoin, I think, is up more now than what it says in the snapshot. It's gone past 47K, up more than 4%. ETH is up a few percent as well at 2.4K. Solana's up 4% at $105, though it might be higher now as well. Ape was up a couple of percent at 1.4. In terms of the headlines, yes, Bitcoin surges past 46K, up 4%. Top ordinals moved down just a touch with that move. Number 2, Pandora NFTs hit 13 ETH on ERC 404 hype. They're up more than 25% in the last 24 hours. We haven't really dug into those that much, and I haven't reported on that much, basically because I hadn't got on top of them yet. We want to share what we've learned about them during the course of this show. Interesting tech, or is it overhyped? Legendary will give his take, and I'll do a little bit on it too. And finally, legendary Bored Ape collector and trader Franklin sells his iconic gold ape for 275 ETH, $669,000. Not a small amount. I saw a lot of emotion on the timeline at this fairly iconic moment. Would be interested to hear people's thoughts on Franklin's kind of position historically in that kind of NFT history. Um, Getting into some floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks at 59.8, up a percent. Bored Apes at 24.2, Mutants at 4.3, DGods at 3, Captains at 4.2, Azuki at 6.6, Penguins up 7% at 17.9, Moonbirds at 1.1, Noun's winning bid was 7.5 ETH. So the big mover there is the Penguins. This is the last week you're going to see that selection of NFT collections. I'm going to have to move those around because some need to go. and some need to be on there. So I'm going to figure out how to do that over the weekend. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Before we get into the headlines, any numbers catching your eye?
That is obviously the big news, that after we talked yesterday about having to update the collection, you are on it. So I'm quite excited to see how the new snapshot will look like in terms of the featured NFT collections. In terms of the numbers standing out, obviously Franklin being the main headline out of all those NFT sales. The thing that I found so in tone with Franklin was that after selling his ape for 600K, his next post on X was the $11 or whatever the amount was that he was able to claim from the creator program by X, which I found absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I saw that. That was so funny, right? He's always, what do you think it was about Franklin that he had accumulated so much capital and so much wealth in NFTs, but he would always trade. This is, I guess, for the people who don't know, like there might genuinely be people here who don't know. Franklin was renowned for flipping Bored Apes for like 0.04 ETH. When the price of Bored Apes were like 50 ETH, there's like, I bought this 3 hours ago for 50.69 ETH. I've sold it for 50.07. I'm not even sure if my numbers are right, but I flipped it for like 0.03 ETH profits after gas or something like that. And that's what he became really renowned for. And I'd listened to some talks with him or an interview that he did, and his whole game plan was to simply accumulate more apes. Like that was it. That was the game plan. Accumulate more apes, use money to accumulate more apes. And I think ultimately, I'm not sure the details of what kind of led to his demise. I can't remember. I think it was maybe overextending himself, both in the Bored Ape ecosystem, but maybe elsewhere too. Do you have any details on that, Legendary? Do you remember what the actual cause was?
I mean, there were rumors floating across the space, but some of which related to him overextended, some of which related to gambling. But I don't want to dive into, the speculations of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I just can't remember. I remember saying something about it. I thought we knew at the time, but I've just forgotten whether we got to the bottom of it, whether that became public or not. How did you feel when you saw this news? We might as well start there on that headline because it is a headline. Huge person in NFT history, I think, as one of these very significant traders, very prominent Bored Ape holders who has, finally sold his digital identity. Like, was there any, did you feel any sadness? Did you not care? Like, what was your
No,
reaction?
I felt really sad. I mean, honestly, I enjoyed seeing Franklin trading. It was fun to see his min-maxing, buying a shit ton of apes and flipping them for $7 in profit after gas after 3 minutes and 42 seconds, and all that type of posts that he made. He still is a trader and a degen at heart, and it was very enjoyable to see that. It was also enjoyable to see like the dedication he put into stuff that he was passionate about, like the launch of revenue for views and impressions on X, when people used to farm the comment section of stuff, and he was like posting his golden ape under every single meme, and that until the ape itself became a meme and other people started posting it, and you basically couldn't go to any popular post on X without scrolling through the comments and seeing 4 or 5 golden Franklin apes in there. So I don't know. If he's now leaving the space for good, I'd be really sad about that.
Indeed. It is a kind of a sad moment. I wasn't sure how. I'm trying to think about how, why I feel affected by it. In a sense, it was just a very prominent person, and the thing is, he did attract various criticism. There was various criticism of him at the during different points in time, but at the same time, the guy was just so long JPEGs, and I think there was just this feeling that, I mean, can you really think of anyone more red pilled into JPEG universe than the guy who is just trading for like $8 profit, trying to maximize, this new speculative asset. Like, and I think there's something in that to be so crazy, that everyone just kind of aspires to in this space. Like, any reflections on that, Legendary? And then can see Tiro and Oxy have their hand raised. Want to hear from them on this particular piece of news.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with you, and also really curious to hear Oxy's and Tiro's thoughts on it. And also I saw Sam just unmuted himself, so curious to hear from him as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Let's go to Tiro first. Your hand was raised first. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What did you think of Franklin selling his ape?
It's a big thing. It's a huge event. A lot of people are well known that he knows his ape. They've seen it. They affiliated with Franklin. He made a lot of trades and got a lot of traction for the ape community, and was buying up with Maki and basically controlling the floor of ApeSet for a period of time, right?
Yeah.
And now, like, but there needs to be, like, looking back at Franklin, the meteoric rise, but there was also a fall. Let's remember that. Let's stay humble. Just because you're up doesn't mean you're always going to be up, and every play you're going to make is going to win. So, he made a post, was very heartfelt, that he lost and gambled some money in Rollbit and some other avenues. So maybe this caused him to have to sell his ape that is well known and renowned within NFT land and Twitter. So just a wise word to, stay humble, keep yourself grounded, and make sure, not every trade's going to be amazing. So, we can't win every bet.
Yeah, that's such an important learning, right? Like, I think we see it happen so often in this space, where the analogy I give all the time, it's actually one of, if I ever do any type of branding thing, this is what the brand would be. It would be the story of Icarus, like flying too close to the sun. I think in this world, we see so many examples of people rising really, really fast, and then they just get too close and they get burned every single time. And it just happens over and over and over again, because we don't seem to have a good way to tell when to just take some chips off the table, like when people are on turbo speed. And that's like the key image in my mind all the time, people getting too close to the sun and then just ultimately getting burned. Oxy, your hand was raised, and would love to hear from Sam as well. Oxy, what are your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback off of what you said about, like, why do I feel a certain way? It's funny, like, back in 2021, he was like everyone knew Franklin, everyone like followed his trades and all that kind of thing. It's almost like when your favorite like sports player retires. Like, I remember when Derek Jeter retired from baseball. I felt so sad because he's not playing anymore. I'm not going to see him, But I was like, why do I feel this way? And that was the closest thing I could get to. So I don't know, maybe a dumb analogy, but yeah, my 2 cents, I guess.
Well, do you know what? The funny thing about that is that I genuinely feel, or I approach content like sports now as well. Like, I think there's a lot of similarities between actually maybe even trading as well, like the dedication, the routineness, the getting up for it every single day, the fact you're going to lose a lot and you've got to keep going in order to win. Like, I think there's all kinds of parallels there. So I'm unsurprised that someone feels like that. And it's interesting that you kind of bring that analogy up. I find that very interesting. Thanks for that. Sam, you came off mute. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on Franklin maybe potentially retiring from the game in this respect?
Yeah, I mean, Franklin's someone who I have mixed feelings towards him, and he's someone who I've been friends with for a few years, kind of on and off. When I think of Franklin, I think of, first of all, he is a Bored Ape Yacht Club maxi in a way. Like, that is what he is through and through. Everything else is a meme, So he would be out there flipping, and then he'd close it, and then he'd make those tweets so that we'd be here talking about it. But I don't think that was the core of Franklin. I think that was just the core of Franklin's meme, which was, that he had all these apes. Yeah, he was someone he's an engineer. I think he worked for Lockheed Martin even while he was doing all of this. He bought a ton of apes really early and got a ton of wealth out of it, and just kind of kept doubling down. He and I had a relationship when apes were flipping punks. You know, to me, that's one of like the keynote moments in NFTs. And he was so obsessed with it and buying all these apes because he really trolled punks. He really was really into the idea of utility NFTs and not being a punk guy. And I think. And then once he had all these apes, he did IP deals. So he kind of doubled down on that. And I think over time, he went from being an ape maxi to just being an all out profit at all cost maxi a little bit, where and this is where I started to lose him a little bit. Like I saw there were discords where he would go and try to get a bunch of people to like pump and dump V1 punks or other stuff, where he'd be like, let's all go in now. And then they'd all trigger sales together. And he was kind of like, hey, I'm doing it. Like, this is all legal, so I'm going to do it. But for someone, I found it sometimes a little bit outside of what I thought was like, it was a little, I struggle with that mentality a little bit in the space. So he started doing a couple things like that I take a bit more issue with. And I think in the end, I think there was a little bit of a gamble aspect, and obviously there's a gamble aspect to all of this. But I think the real downfall was that once he got a fair bit of money and was able to get a lot of liquidity from BendDAO, if you look at any of his apes, there's a ton of ETH pool. Like each one of them has been to BendDAO 50 times or something like that. And he started to I think he backed someone who rugged him. And I think it was to the tune of like millions of dollars. So I don't think this was like him going out and, just like putting it all on black. I think it was him backing someone, him saying, I have all this liquidity, I want to make use of it. And someone basically took his money and ran. And I think that was like the pivotal moment where he really lost a lot because he trusted someone in this space. And I think after that, I think that was when he kind of disappeared. So I don't know, he's a mixed guy, but this guy was a Bored Ape Yacht Club maxi through and through. And I mean, like I said, you just saw it. And then he just became relentless about profit and gaming whatever thing he could game. And overall, though, I think he's a good dude, and I enjoyed friendship with him. I will say this though, there was a guy named Go West who wrote a big post about how he was leaving forever because he had a gambling addiction, and his wife told him that it was time to quit. And he just had this like come to Jesus moment where he sold all of his NFTs, tons of Grail doodles, wrote a blog post about gambling addiction. Everyone applauded him, and 1 year later he swept 50 doodles and he's back. So you never know, if people stay away forever.
That's so insightful. Thanks so much for like the broader history and providing the other side as well, because I think a lot of people might not hear that side of the story as the story kind of changes and people only want to remember the better stuff, because that's how memories work. Sometimes they're kind of selective and they want to remember the good stuff for what he was most prominent for. But as you say, there was this other side, I guess, and it's important to at least put that out there on some level. Thanks for that, Sam. Legendary, any reflections on that? Kind of interesting takes, interesting feelings which have come up on this before we get into the Bitcoin kind of news and the general airdrop stuff?
Yeah, it's never black and white, right? There are so many shades of gray, especially in the Web3 space.
Indeed, a lot of shades of gray. Let's get into. So I think we've touched on that. That's a cool, an interesting story to have followed. Let's get into the Bitcoin news, because Bitcoin has surged past, I believe now. Let's double check. It's like update coin market cap. I think we've gone past 47K, so we're up almost 5.5% in the last 24 hours. Two things I want to do on price today, Legendary. I'm going to share the screen for people watching. Oops, wrong button. On YouTube and on X, because we're actually live on video on X as well. I want to talk a little about Bitcoin. Talk about why it's going up. Beanie had an idea. He's been tweeting quite bullishly about Bitcoin the last few days. Want to see what your thoughts are on that, and then talk about Dimension, because we just can't ignore it. We're just going to have to keep having sections of the show on airdrops like routinely, because they're just going to keep doing things and we want to keep track of it because we want to know how the next thing is going to play out and see if we can see any patterns or whatever. So the first thing I wanted to share was this Beanie take. I wanted to get your take on it, Legendary. So Beanie said yesterday And he's been tweeting similar things in the last couple of days. Bitcoin ETF may have been a temporary sell the news event, but the sell-off was just a little blip on the chart. As it turns out, the institutions are actually aping right now. You can see it in their filings. Max Payne will be holding a bag of supposedly high beta alts that underperform. So Bitcoin is up a significant amount, literally in the last 24 hours. What's your thought on this Beanie take? What's your thought on Bitcoin at the moment?
I mean, Beanie had some more takes on that were even more straightforward, which I fully agree with. Well, one was, on a long enough timeline, you will not outperform the king, just shut the fuck up and hodl. And the other one was, as it turns out, and this one I agree with, as it turns out, nothing was priced in, just a bunch of noodle-handed and experts on crypto Twitter calling for 30K BTC. We go higher. You guys like to follow supposed experts here that are literally teenagers and know absolutely nothing about markets, and you should be faded more than anything. A bit blunt, very typical for Beanie, but in principle, he is right about what he's saying. And I think that's so important to keep in mind when you scroll through the timeline and you see people doing the technical analysis on charts and all those shiny things and patterns that they're trying to spot in a chart. That's, yeah, I don't have a very high opinion of that. Let's put it like that.
I love how these people make up these straw men. It's like, I don't remember anybody on my timeline calling for 30,000 Bitcoin, but probably one person showed up in his comments saying, we're going to 30,000. And now he's literally devoting his timeline to dunking on that one person who, like, my entire timeline was bullish Bitcoin. And here you got a guy like dunking on like the 0.1% that was saying 30,000 and devoting their entire audience's attention to whoever that person was. But I think that,
but you know,
look, I think the GBTC dynamic was a big driver here. And I don't think this is about, I think that was real, but I tweeted a chart, and I'm not sure how relevant this chart is, but it got some virality, and I thought it was kind of interesting, of gold after the gold ETF started coming out. And
yeah,
like,
I looked at the same chart.
It is just like it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue with this fundamental trend. It kind of makes me want to go out and buy more ETH. As well as Bitcoin.
It's a good point you made there, Sam, on the gold chart, because we looked at it and discussed it on the show a while back. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it tracked is like, it's not like the ETF was announced and then it just went up straight away, right? There was like this period of time where it kind of either stayed the same, maybe even trended lower just for a touch, and it took like institutions maybe a bit of time to adjust. And like,
I think it went up reasonably quickly, but I think the bigger lesson there was it was like a 20-year change in paradigm.
Yeah.
Where suddenly gold just went from being this asset that you had to like really kind of go through a bit of effort to get to something you could instantly get, and suddenly it just became an entirely new asset class.
Yeah.
And even I find it a pain in the ass to buy Bitcoin, move stuff to Coinbase, and like buy it from like I don't know, like I personally have already bought some using IBIT. I just like, I work full time in this space for tax reasons and other reasons. Like I always find like my crypto universe just something a little bit difficult. So even I, as someone who's full time in NFTs, have already started to use the ETF.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I actually was asking the same question, or I was about to, because as I just said, I got all this dimension the last few days and I wanted to allocate some of it to Bitcoin, sell some for tax, sell some for just having some stables, stake some, and then get Bitcoin. But like, I haven't done it yet. And now the price is up another 5K because of that exact barrier that you just said. It's just way harder to get it. And I was wondering also, when it comes to future airdrops, I'm thinking forward, like, is there, I don't know if you're aware of anything, like, is there a DEX on Bitcoin yet? Like, is there a way to buy stables on Bitcoin? Is there a way to buy Bitcoin with ERC20 stables? I assume not. That's why we always have to go to a centralized exchange. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sam? Oh,
sorry, say the question one more time. Do I have thoughts on say it one more time? Sorry.
On the ability for someone to have their stables on ETH, and whether you need to go to the centralized exchange or not first, but to then get those stables onto Bitcoin somewhere, so that there's some kind of DEX on Bitcoin where you might be able to buy Bitcoin, so that you don't have to do everything via centralized exchange, get exposure to these future dApps getting built out onto Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm sure there are ways. I'm not super familiar with it, but yeah, I've historically just bought Bitcoin on like Kraken and a little bit. Yeah, I mean, Coinbase fees have been expensive. They have Coinbase Pro, but when Coinbase Pro was like the default, I bought a bunch there. And I'm not like someone who's like, I'm not a decentralization maxi, even though I've dodged a bullet with FTX. But yeah, and I think I'm about to be using the ETF going forward. 0.1% fee. I have a lot of trust in BlackRock. Like, I'm fine with that.
Fair enough. Good point. Legendary, I know you want to come in here. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no. First of all, what I was saying before is that with the BTC timeline, YouTube was very negative on it after the ETF launch, and that correction. It was like BTC won't stop crashing type of headlines, videos that went very, very viral.
YouTube stuff is so dumb, isn't it?
And in terms of my personal BTC holdings, honestly, 99% of my BTC is wrapped BTC just on ETH because I can't be bothered to deal with anything else than that. That's the easiest thing to do, at least to me. And I've also now started to shift it into the ETF because very much in line with Sam, do trust BlackRock, and it's cheap, it's fast, it's convenient. So why not do it? And before that, it was just wrapped BTC, easiest way to convert stables, ETH, and whatever else. For me, coming from an ETH maximalist perspective into having a BTC exposure and also being able to use that in the DeFi ecosystem of ETH.
Interesting. So I've got two perspectives there. One, the wrapped BTC option, or the alternative option, which is just trust these institutions now, get that ETF exposure. Interesting to hear those takes. Funky, your hand is raised. What's your take on it? What's the way you'd like to get the Bitcoin exposure, and what are your thoughts on this price action now?
I mean, love the price action, right? Who doesn't? But I think just, to the points that Sam and Legendary have already made, if you're not a decentralization max, you may as well just use wrap Bitcoin, right? Like if you don't really care about it, and that way it's just easy to stay on ETH. But I do know that there are some significant L2s that we're going to see sort of a DeFi boom on Bitcoin. That's coming very soon. There's a lot. I mean, Stacks obviously has been out there building for a long time. You already have protocols like Thorchain, where you can use the Rune token, that you can go back from native to the wrapped version. But I think with these L2s, like I know there's one in the pipeline, for instance, that already has like a ledger integration, and it involves using native Bitcoin that you can deposit and effectively earn yield. But it's on that L2, what's actually happening is it's going into a type of smart contract that is actually using partly wrapped Bitcoin. So I think that you're gonna see, as that proliferation of these L2s that are being built out specifically for DeFi purposes on the Bitcoin network, I think you're gonna start to see some of those integrations happen to make it more seamless to maybe go from one to the other. But they're still probably a little ways off. I know there's at least 2 or 3 that we're in, our parent VC is in terms of the seed rounds. So I think we're going to see a big boom in this stuff later on. And it could drive Bitcoin that much higher if DeFi becomes a thing on native Bitcoin.
I absolutely love that take. And that's kind of, well, I'm not literally betting on it because I haven't been able to bet on it yet in Bitcoin, but it's one that I want to bet on. Like, if people know the people who are building that stuff out, please let me know. I want to bet on it in some way because I think it's such I don't know. I just think it's a very natural progression for where they want to go right now. And I know some of the maxis are a bit hesitant and might prefer Bitcoin to stay purer, but at the same time, like, I think that's the direction it's going. I think people want DeFi on Bitcoin, and I think it's just the damn biggest coin by far. So I definitely am very, very interested in what's getting built out from that perspective. Legendary, any final reflections on Bitcoin? Want to get onto Dimension in just a moment and figure out what on earth is going on there?
Nothing to add. I'm very happy to use that segue straight away into talking about Dimension.
Okay, so let's get into the Dimension news. I've got 2 things to show people here. I have the chart, which looks pretty nice. I'm not going to lie. If your chart looks like this when you come out after dropping a token, you would not be complaining. So Dimension is now at $7.7. This is a fully diluted market cap of 7.6 billion. It went as high as 820 yesterday. And remember, when this came out the gate, it was like I think it dropped down to maybe 450. It was around 5 when it came right out the gate, had a little dip and then just completely ripped. We had statistics yesterday shared that I think 80% of the dimension that was claimed just went straight into staking. Remember, when someone stakes, they cannot, even if they were to stake and then unstake immediately, they would have to wait 21 days before they can get their tokens back in their hands, before they can sell. So this has obviously created a bit of a situation where there's not much supply. Not only is there not much supply on the market because they only dropped a certain percentage of the total supply, firstly, but then on top of that, of the circulating supply that is circulating, the majority of it seems to have just gone to stake. So there's not a lot of tokens out there for people to buy, causing this upward buying pressure. So we're at almost, we're at $7.60 Legendary. What's going on here from your perspective? I've got DFarmer's left curve take to share in a moment, but I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
I think that airdrop meta narrative is dominating the timeline. Everyone's like, oh, we got so many things for staking tier. Obviously, there's the connection between wormhole and dimension. So there's a bit of that expectation narrative on the timeline. If you stake dimension, you might get other airdrops, such as the W token by wormhole. And I do think if you are a protocol like dimension, and then you see that so much is staked of your own token, then obviously if everyone does it, then that's not an outstanding criterion anymore, and you have to come up with other metrics. And now you have the first proposal to vote on dimension. So there are the threads already coming out on X saying you need to vote on that proposal. Everyone is staking. If everyone's staking, again, that's, well, not an outstanding thing to do any longer, but maybe the eligibility criterion will also be, have you voted and have you participated in the decentralization, as we've also seen it with other airdrops before. And that is also to me like, that's also to me like the parallel to the Bitcoin discussion that we had before, because if you want to vote, you can't use your MetaMask wallet, you can't use your ETH native wallet, you have to use a Capital wallet. If you have a ledger, you have to connect it. If you have a hot wallet, you have to import the private key. So there is a bit of an obstacle, and most people will be too lazy to do it. And hence, I think it's worthwhile doing. Very same as with me being, very convenient with buying my rep BTC and not bothering with figuring out what's going on with BTC DeFi, which is something that I know I'm going to change my stance on that over the next 1 to 2 weeks, doing some research and figuring out, okay, what is being built? How can I participate? Because I do see that ecosystem heating up. So as always, I think like the right curve of things is where many people are just too lazy to do it and can't be bothered to set up a new tech stack or whatever it is that you need to do to participate.
Good stuff. And just to be clear, like one of the things you said, lots of important things there. One of the things that can get lost in the broader ideas is like the practical thing, which is go and vote. Like when these when these things are doing things like that, I know 90% of people will still not do it. And also it was like one sentence that you said as part of this bigger idea. But if you want the bigger gains, when there are points of friction, typically, look, nothing's guaranteed. We're not saying anything's guaranteed. Nothing is perfect advice, certainly not financial advice, but like it should be clear now, there's been enough of these that you can start to spot trends, and participation is important. So that's something to keep in mind. This was the left curve thesis on Dimension by DFarmer. You mentioned Celestia, and look, I know we've spoken about this a few times now, but it will continue to remain relevant. So we'll just repeat it to some extent. DFarmer published this yesterday. He said, okay, of course, none of this is financial advice, but number one, airdrop is clearly the new meta, and everyone who is ripe with rollups are ready to deploy, thousands of them. And there's this little screenshot, which you might not be able to see if you're just listening in. For Dimension, there are 1,135 rollups. Is that listed? Deployed. So basically there's thousands of rollups ready to go live, like on Dimension. And the thesis is what I'm about to share. Thousands of them. Will all airdrop supply? No. Most will be bad, but many will, and some will be massive. So just like Dimension was for tier stakers, the thesis is that some of these rollups which launch from Dimension will be genuinely good in the exact same way that tier stakers receive Dimension stakers should receive one of these good tokens of the thousands that might try to provide you with some tokens. He goes on to say, already staked percentage is insane. You haven't even seen the big mouth YouTubers shilling life-changing gains yet, and passive income machines on their channels. I wonder how far off YouTubers are away from that. Legendary, would like to hear your perspective on that. Passive income is a meme, make no mistake, but it doesn't matter. It's the narrative that matters. This whole market runs on sentiment and narratives. It's all I trade. But if you want to keep squiggling charts on a day-old coin or keep mid-curving with FTV, it's bad because it feels like some big brain thing to do. Go ahead. Yes, it matters. No, it doesn't matter now or next week or next month. I'm going to stop there, Legendary. What are your takes on that so far?
Yeah, one point that I really resonate with is that the narrative matters, right? Your own opinion is irrelevant. I've said that with my own opinion on the relative lows concept with Solana pumping, because the relative low is it's further away from its all-time high, relatively speaking, than ETH, and that was the dominating narrative on X. And I was like, I personally don't think this is like a legit reason for something to pump, but if this is the narrative, who am I to speak against it? So I'm going to buy a bag of Sol as well, and follow that narrative. And I think this is very important. We do trade on narratives, we do trade on sentiment. I think the additional complexity, and it's something I touched on yesterday as well in the show, that gets introduced with that kind of thing is, and if a lot of a token supply is staked and is in a bonding period, once that narrative goes away, once that sentiment shifts, the price crash will be even more dramatic, right? Because everyone then, once the sentiment has shifted, will wait for their tokens to unlock so they can dump them. And then the circulating supply that is not staked becomes significantly higher, and that just increases that downwards momentum. So that is something to keep in mind if you are thinking about the opportunity cost of staking versus selling at this point, and how you want to allocate your Dimension resources, your Dimension tokens, and what you want to do with them. With that being said, I am in the camp of, this not financial advice, of staking a large part of my Dimension, half that across a couple wallets, of participating in the governance, because again, that is an additional friction point that many people won't do. But in the long term, I think we've seen it with many airdrops that those tokens tend to go down very heavily in price, except for the few protocols that manage to survive over the next 1-2 years, and not only survive but also stay like super relevant. And it is impossible to predict which protocols those will be. I think one of the most important things that we touched on the Dimension discussion so far was on the show when we had Karma on, and Karma said she has many friends who are CTOs, who are senior devs, and they themselves were like, we don't exactly understand what Dimension does. So that's probably also important to keep in mind, right?
Absolutely. Lots of good points there, and food for thought. I'm going to go to Funky now to ask a specific question. Then you can take it in whatever direction you like before we hit the Web3 news, and then get onto this ERC 404 news. I think that's the number. I'm not looking at it right now. Funky, what are your thoughts specifically on this second part of, or third part of DeFarmer's thread, which is another narrative is that Dimension basically does for apps what Celestia does for chains, kind of. It's Tier's buddy. That's the narrative. They go together to do cool things. Scalability, baby. What do you think? That was one that was new to me. I hadn't heard that specifically. I know that you are a bit more familiar with these chains and the roll-ups and what they do. What are your thoughts on that specific narrative and anything else?
Yeah, so before I get to that, just real quick, so everybody knows, Cosmos operates on a system called delegated proof of stake. So if you are already staked, theoretically, and I will double check that this is the case for Dimension, if your validator is voting, you automatically follow the validator's vote. And this first vote is very just a technical thing, so I don't think it's going to be anybody's going to be voting no or whatever. However, I always recommend just in your Leap or Kepler wallet, there's a governance button. You can just click on the chain. If you're on Dimension, You just go ahead and vote. And I just, in fact, I voted while you guys were talking about it, and I put it in the comments.
Nice.
To
Thanks,
your
man.
point about the Celestia thing, so Celestia is effectively a data availability layer. So what we're starting to see with a lot of these chains is you can sort of abstract away certain pieces of it. So you just need these, again, you get this whole modular thesis where you just need a part of a blockchain. So instead of having to carry all the data load on, say, Dimension, you're using that Celestia piece, and this is being built on top as sort of the settlement layer. And so this frees up a lot of the processing power of the chain to run these rollups. And so one of the things I've been hearing for Dimension in particular is gaming, and of course that's going to be a hot thesis right now, the big narrative, to the earlier point about following narratives and everything else. So I think that what you're going to see with many of these rollups that are launching is potentially those airdrops. Again, not financial advice and so on and so forth. But I think that's why people are staking and why there's so many people just rushing to kind of stake. So I think that ultimately this is where that's going. But this is just, Dimension is just like a layer that rides on top of Celestia, and it doesn't need to have all that data availability, because now it can just kind of be freed up because it's leaning on Celestia to do that. And instead it can just use most of the chain's processing power to do things like these gamings or other rollups that are being built out. They're very specific. They're almost like dApps, but they're just kind of rollups, so that makes the transaction fees and everything else very cheap. And I'll double check about the Dimension and the voting and get back to you in the Discord.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. I think it's really helpful just to try at least. And as Legendary said, some more technical people also don't fully understand, but at least to have some like rudimentary way to understand what is what the key differences are, what the key similarities are. I think that is very helpful to understand. Right. We've got 10 more minutes left of the show today. I want to bring you the Web3 roundup from the snapshot, which is pinned up top, as always, to get you up to speed with what else has been happening in the space in the last 24 hours. And then we're going to touch on these the ERC404 hype, certain Pandora NFTs hitting 13 ETH. What the hell is going on? Legendary is going to explain in just a moment. Let's get into the Web3 roundup. We have in the snapshot up top, number one, another airdrop, $3 million of dog timeless internet culture airdropped to more than 500,000 base holders. I haven't checked this yet, but I made a note of it. I'm going to check later. Make sure you check it out. Cryptopathic says today we dropped 770 million dog token to over 500,000 new holders on base. They now all own the Doge, a timeless piece of internet culture that has been immortalized on the blockchain. Go and check if you have been doing stuff on base. Number two, Yuga admits mistake of Legends of the Mara loot mint being on an L1. People seem to be very dissatisfied with the fact this took place on L1 when it should not have been. A lot of dissatisfaction there. Number three, Solana Mobile announces first chapter 2 screenshot has been taken in case you are farming rewards for selling physical phones. Number four, Animoca-backed Pixels game raises $4.8 million in strategic round. Seems to be a little bit of criticism on the timeline for the community allocation. That's happened a couple of times now for these games. I haven't dug into whether that's warranted or not, just for you to be aware. And final two pieces, 6 BTC collections with at least 10K supply did more than $1 million of volume in the last week. Ordinal showing a hell of a lot of strength in this market. And finally, an Ether Rock is to be sold at auction at Sotheby's. Very entertaining to see the Ether Rock at Sotheby's there. Legendary. Those are the rest of the roundup pieces of news. Let's get into the Pandora NFT news and the ERC404 hype, just to set it up for people. We've got K Sensei as well on stage with us, who I know will be able to speak to this in a moment. Legendary, set it up for people. What is the ERC404 hype? Why are Pandora NFTs hitting 13 ETH?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into that. ERC 404 standard, which is a hybrid between fungible and non-fungible tokens. So hybrid between ERC 721, ERC 20, essentially means you have an NFT with a natively inbuilt function of being able to fractionalize it. You can choose in how many shares or how many fractions you want that ERC 404 token to be fractionalized in. And say you have an NFT that you fractionalize into 100 pieces. If you want to transfer that NFT, you have to transfer at least 100 tokens. If you transfer less than that, it gets burned. If you then accumulate, again, the minimum amount to have a full NFT, it gets minted. So it's basically an NFT with inbuilt fractionalization in it, which in itself is pretty cool. I think it's also important to keep in mind that it is a more complex token standard. That means transferring it, interacting with it is more expensive than doing so with a regular NFT, and somehow it has managed to take over the timeline massively by storm. And that again connects to the point that I just made previously. I personally am not too impressed with the token standard. I mean, yes, it's cool, but it's not mind-blowing. But again, it doesn't matter what I think. It's absolutely irrelevant. The timeline loves it. And Pandora and other 404s are proof of that hype that we're seeing around 404 tokens right now.
Love it. Very, very helpful summary for people. I think that's a helpful point to start. Interesting that you don't think it's that innovative or not particularly excited about it at a minimum. There were a few people at our meetup yesterday who were more excited about it and would love to hear Kei-sensei's thoughts, potentially as an opposing opinion to your thought. Kei-sensei, welcome to the stage. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, GM everyone. I hope you can hear me fine.
Yep, we got you.
But I'm not a technical person myself, and honestly, I would side with Legendary.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like the standard is as innovative as it would like to seem. But the narrative around it has really picked up, and I think a lot of the dev community is kind of feeling hurt by it, or underappreciated. People are either saying that this already exists, we've already built that, or you can't just build something in your tiny lab and then go and call it an ERC, or call it say you're doing a fractionalized NFT when you're actually minting and burning tokens every time. So it's not there's a lot of opposition from the dev community, but I think for people like myself and a lot of people who don't really understand the technicals of it, it's a great sounding narrative, and it's picked up. I'm not sure where it's gonna go, but it's winning. All documentation about it just says that it's unaudited and experimental. I think they've padded it as much as they can. And another aspect of this, that this is actually in their last week, the third or the second attempt to do this. One was Emerald, something called Emerald, the collection, that miserably failed. It basically ended up pump and dump. So this team was just okay, we're gonna make it work. It's going to be an ERC20 and ERC721 at the same time, and this time they succeeded. I call it an NFT that's a particle and a wave at the same time. I guess that's my conceptual framework. But yeah, mostly I want to say that devs seem dismayed all over, and people are just taping it.
Very, very interesting. That's a very interesting take. One thing that you said, well, two key things. One, it seems like a lot of people feel like this has already been done in some capacity. The fact it's being called ERC 404, just to check with you, Kei-sensei, am I right in thinking that this is not an official Ethereum standard yet, right? There's some kind of it's nothing. There's nothing official about this as things stand, right?
Yeah, I don't think, ERC stands for request for comment. I don't think there's been any request or any comments. So it's just kind of popped up and is flying.
Damn. Okay. We don't have much long left, but I want to give BSCN Gaming an opportunity to come in. Quick final take on this. BSCN Gaming. Is this interesting? Is it not gaming? Particularly from a gaming perspective, maybe you have an alternative outlook.
Hey, good afternoon. What is up? I always appreciate you letting me on. I'll try and be quick. I don't have a particular knowledge base on this subject. I've just done a little bit of reading on the side. I think experimentation for this space is great, and that's all I see this as. And often, especially in the Web3 space, at whose cost does that come to? That's the question I'm asking. And to your question earlier, you're definitely right. So this hasn't been this hasn't been taken through the traditional vetting processes, auditing processes, the penetration tests that normally are applied to ERC standards. So that's why dev community is a little bit upset. It's like, hang on, nobody's actually looked at this. This hasn't been really tested or tried. There's probably issues with it, but hey, if you want to go ahead, go for it. Which sort of leads to that point that this might just be the new shiny thing syndrome that a lot of this space is inflicted with. So when we see these types of things, everybody's kind of up in arms about it, and people try to get the first mover advantage, because the other narrative is everybody now wants provenance, right? So whatever's the new shiny thing, let me jump on it first because I want to be the first collection if in case it takes off. So there's these things you should consider. This isn't yet proven to be sound.
Very, very fair point. Appreciate that take. Legendary, any final thoughts before we wrap today? Just quick shout out to Ibrahim as well in the comments, kind of reiterating what has been said. I don't think it's that innovative or exciting either. Clearly a mismatch between what's happening in the market versus what some people on the ground are thinking.
Yeah, I think a cigar put it beautifully at the end of their post, saying the other gripe I have is that the 404 number is very arbitrary. It doesn't follow the standard EIP numbering process. However, since everyone is already using the ERC 404 moniker, perhaps we've already reached the social consensus that ERC aimed for, and it is the social consensus that matters.
Interesting stuff. We are obviously going to monitor it as we go into the weekend and come into next week. So we'll keep an eye on that Pandora price and report back over the weekend. But for now, guys, it's been a fantastic show. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Legendary, for co-hosting as always. Thank you to our speakers, NFT Stats, Sam, BSCN Gaming, Sammy, Oxy, Funky, K-Sensei, Tiro, and anyone else who contributed. Thank you so much for joining, everyone in the audience too. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. We will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.